Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, I'm Pierce Bogan, and today we are joined by Mike Bluestein, a developer evangelist at Xamarin. Today, Mike is going to be presenting on developing and designing native mobile apps in Xamarin Studio, and he's going to give an in-depth look at some of our favorite Xamarin Studio features, including full support for NuGet packages, extensive documentation for the .NET base class libraries, F# support, and the ability to build native user interfaces with our iOS and Android designers. This webinar is being recorded, so if you have to step out for a bit or anything, no worries. We will upload and email the video to you when it's ready. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in GoToMeeting's questions section, and we're going to do our best to get to as many questions as possible in a short Q&A immediately following Mike's presentation. With that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Thanks, Pierce. So good morning, good afternoon, everybody, wherever you are. Thanks for joining us today. So yeah, like Pierce said, we're gonna talk about Xamarin Studio, show you some of the cool new things that we've added to Xamarin Studio, and I built a little app to use as a conduit for discussing the IDE and some of the new features. So first, before we do that, I just want to take a couple minutes here to get everyone on the same page, in case there's some folks out there that are new to Xamarin, to talk a little bit about what Xamarin is and the approach we bring to mobile development and how it differs from a couple other common approaches that folks use. So one way that you'll often see, probably the largest way that people develop mobile apps, is what we're calling a siloed approach. And this is really just, you're going to build an we'll talk about the three major platforms, three largest platforms being iOS, Android, and the various Windows platforms, Windows Phone and say Windows Store. So you could develop for each of these platforms using the languages and toolkits, IDEs and SDKs directly from the different vendors, be it Apple or Google or Microsoft, right? And that's fine, right? You'll end up with no limitations in what you can do. You'll end up being able to create excellent applications, or at least the platform won't limit you in any way with what you can create. But you're put in a tough position in that you have to do everything 3 times, right? So it's not just 3 times the skills. The skills are important, but it's good to have skills. But even if you have the skill on every platform, it's 3 times the work. And even if you have the ability or the resources to do the development 3 times, you still have that redundancy. So you could have bugs that are fixed in one place that is a shame that are introduced in similar but different code implemented in different languages, different tools on other platforms. So it's not really an efficient, cost-effective way, and and it can be a little bit frustrating if you are the same developer, for sure, working on these things. So not ideal from a developer's perspective to take the siloed approach. So with that, a common way people address that, or one way, is to try to take a write once, run anywhere approach. And this is, from a developer's perspective, solves all the things that we were just talking about that are difficult from a siloed approach. It can be cost effective, and you're reusing all your code, right? But that's the idea. Except it doesn't really work, or it works to an extent. These least common, usually the toolkits that do these things, they sit on top of some kind of a web framework. Not that there's anything inherently wrong with web frameworks, but they're not designed for mobile applications. They're designed for the web. So what you end up with is not having complete access to all the platform capabilities. Some things you may have, some things you may not. Even if you have all the platform access to the subset of features that you may need in your case, you're still going to run into issues both in how things look, which can be addressed with styling, but again, that will shift as platforms change, and that have to be restyled, so there'll be work there that could otherwise be avoided. And also in performance. And performance can take on a variety of things, from like I/O performance, network performance, rendering, animation, bitmap compositing performance can be really affected. So things like touch and scroll, you get this kind of choppy experience depending on what you're doing, even for certain simpler interactions. So again, what you end up with here is you're limiting what you can do, and you're putting yourself in a position where the platform is constraining your ability to create a great application. And what happens, that end user looks at your app and it's like, hey, it's not a great app, and it may not be your fault, right? It's just because you've put these kind of handcuffs on yourself to try to like be efficient. So what does Xamarin do that solves this? So our approach is unique in this respect. We want to give you code sharing, right? But we don't want you to sacrifice ability to access the platform capabilities. We don't want you to sacrifice performance. We want you to do everything that people taking the siloed approach could do, but we want you to get closer to the, efficiency and the code reuse aspects that the right ones for an anywhere camp would take. So we sort of in the middle in that way, where you'd still get the platform specifics, but you won't get reuse of the user interface code. You'd be writing that multiple times, even though you'd be doing it in one set of tools and with one programming language. You can do it all, right, which is nice to not have that context switch. Quite nice programming language, and we also have F# support in addition to C# you see on the screen. But you then have a common core that you can build upon that could be reused. This could be 50, 60, 70%. It depends on how you structure your app. But so it's not a complete once run anywhere solution, because as we discussed, that's not the best, right? Now, that said, though, we've even taken this now a step further recently with Xamarin 3, introducing Xamarin Forms, which does give you some degree of reuse of the UI code. However, it isn't a write once, run anywhere sort of rendering platform where we have our own toolkit. It sits on top of native controls. So you still have the native platform even on the UI. It's just doing it at a higher level. And yet, at any point, you can drop directly into the native controls, even though those are the abstraction that is Xamarin Forms is using those as well. So it's not write once, run anywhere completely, but it does give you additional code reuse. So that's kind of the best of all worlds. But the general idea here is we're building native applications, and you have a common core that you can share some code. And if you go and add on the Xamarin Forms approach optionally, which you don't have to use, you can just do this typical standard Xamarin approach and redo the UI. With Xamarin Forms, you can additionally have some UI code reuse. So that's great too, and that's new. What we want to get into here today is just showing the native capabilities of the platforms and where the code reuse part would come in, independent of whether you went Xamarin Forms or not. So that was just a little background to kind of get everyone in sort of the same page of like, why would I even go to Xamarin? This is because you can share quite a bit of code without sacrificing anything. So with that, we're going to talk about Xamarin Studio here today, and like our Xamarin Studio IDE and all the things that it offers to develop mobile applications. That mentioned, we also have great support for Visual Studio. My colleague James did an awesome webinar just a few days ago, and that video is available. And there's lots of stuff on our docs, and you can see about how to do all these kind of things with Visual Studio as well, if you're a Visual Studio user. But today we're talking about Xamarin Studio. And what are we going to go over? We're going to go over a lot of the new things that we have in Xamarin Studio. I want to show you the UI itself has been we already had a refreshed and updated UI before this latest release, but now it's even better. We have a beautiful, gorgeous user interface with high resolution icons and all kinds of nice UI effects to make it really polished, really pleasant experience and a development environment to work in. With that, we introduced the Xamarin Designer for iOS, which is new. It's available in Visual Studio also, but we're going to show it today in Xamarin Studio, show you what that does and how that's the best designer, in my opinion, that's released on the market today that you could use that isn't in some pre-release form from someone or another. We also have that people forget, for a couple of years now we've been shipping a designer for Android, so we'll take a look at that as well. We're going to, Pierce, sounds like you got cited during the intro. We have integrated NuGet support. That's really wonderful integration that a guy named Matt Ward did a terrific job inside of Xamarin Studio. So we have great NuGet support. We have first-class support for F# within the IDE. I'm going to show you a small project at the end of the talk to show you how F# works within. You can use it iOS or Android. I get a little iOS example to show you. Bringing functional languages and like kind of nice, concise syntax to the mobile platforms, which is great. We also, additionally, we integrated the base class library docs from Microsoft through our partnership with Microsoft. And this is great, and it really brings a nice experience when you're using the IDE. You can go in and see in tooltips, BCL Docs when you go into .NET classes from Xamarin Studio. So that's awesome. And improves code sharing. So we've had PCL support. It's now gotten better. It's really high quality PCL integration now. And additionally, we integrated the new shared project support that Microsoft recently released. You can now do shared projects as well, so you can do it either way. We'll talk about why you would maybe, as a guideline, to doing one or the other. So let's discuss a little bit. Take a look at Xamarin Studio. So it's a great IDE. So you can see here the screenshot. We have a beautiful new welcome screen, like kind of modern. It gives you access to some sample projects that we have available. There's our T-shirt app, which you can download to get yourself a T-shirt delivered. If you want one of those nice C-sharp T-shirts, well, you can use the app, put in your information, and you can get the app. It's a really nice app. You could use it as an example, and we'll ship a T-shirt to your house wherever you live in the world. And there's some other examples there: a step counter, a CRM app that you could use that's actually worked on Xamarin Forms, and straight up Xamarin with the task list, employee directory, field service application. So you can try those. In addition, if you go to our GitHub repo, there's a ton of other samples as well. And you get a newsfeed and kind of all the nice things you'd expect from a start screen. So with Xamarin Studio, there's more than just a beautiful look of the thing. We've integrated all the F# language nicely, so that's just first-class support. Like I said, there's the Designer NuGet integration. And there's some other nice little things that kind of like are smaller, things that haven't mentioned, but they're not really small. Things we've had have gotten a lot better. For example, we have great source analysis. Doing things like, if folks are familiar with ReSharper, coming from the Visual Studio world, we have great source analysis that allows you to pick up all kinds of little errors and rules within your code to make things better. So that's pretty cool. So, like I said, we have the Xamarin Designer now. The Xamarin Designer is great. It has full support for all the storyboard things you could do from Xcode, but it does things a lot better than Xcode because it's designed to work with the C# language right from within Xamarin Studio. You don't have to deal with outlets. You know, if folks have come from an Xcode background or even worked with Xamarin before, you've seen outlets. Even in the Xcode world, it's kind of an odd experience, but certainly felt out of place within Xamarin Studio because you integrated things with header files, and C# doesn't need all that. So it's a more modern language. So we don't have to deal with outlets anymore. We just can go straight from controls to code in C# right within Xamarin Studio. No need to go out to Xcode with awesome support for the native platform, all the capabilities. You have a UI kiter at your disposal. All the capabilities that come with storyboards, which are quite cool, are available. Auto layout, support for different versions of iOS, orientation, things like that. Additionally, we're currently the only designer that's shipping in the world today that will allow you to put a custom control at design time and actually render it. If you check out our blog, I actually wrote a post recently about how to actually build a control for the designer and take advantage of design time features. But even if you didn't do that, if you had just any custom control, you'd be able to drop it onto the designer and it will render at design time. It's pretty neat, and we're going to see that in an example I have today. All right. That's new, Xamarin Designer for iOS. People are excited about it because it kind of makes the design time experience on iOS sort of better than it's ever been, right? We also have a designer for Android, though. Like I said, it's been shipping now for a couple of years, and it's excellent in its own right, and it supports the Android AXML format. It has a ton of features, themes, support for different device styles and layouts and all kinds of things. So it works quite well, and we'll take a look at that in an example as well today for completeness. Right? Another thing we've added inside of Xamarin Studio is the NuGet integration. That used to be there was a third-party thing. Actually, the guy that ended up working on this was the guy that originated it in the community. He works at Xamarin now, and he did an awesome job integrating NuGet into Xamarin Studio. We have a beautiful IDE. It's very well integrated both within the Solution Explorer and this little dialog you can see here can be accessed by the integrated Xamarin search. So it's a beautiful integration and works quite well, and you can get full access to NuGet, which gives you whatever 22,000 different libraries or something like that they have just from the release source for Xamarin. So that's excuse me for Microsoft. Okay, so additionally with Xamarin Studio, we added F# support. So we've had F# for a while, but now the support is better. It's well integrated with the IDE. There's project templates, and again, we'll take a look at that as well. We're also going to look at or not even look at, you could use now within Xamarin Studio, if you go over a type that comes from the base class library, you'll get integration with the .NET base class library docs from Microsoft. So this is great. So now from within Xamarin Studio, I can do like this. I can put a tooltip or pull my mouse right over some BCL type, and I get right into the BCL docs. So that's great integrated experience with the docs. That's where it really has the biggest benefit, I think, having the BCL integration. Because you can always go online and you can see the BCL docs, but now it's the fact that we can nicely integrate it makes it like a nice experience as you're developing in Xamarin Studio, on par with the doc experience you get within Visual Studio that you've had for years. Right? Along the same lines of integrating with things from Microsoft, Microsoft recently introduced shared projects. So people might be familiar with file linking. It was like an old way within a particular project or a solution. Say you wanted to go across Android and iOS and share some code, right? Even to Windows, if you even do it in Visual Studio. You can just link to the file basically and have it in all places. But this wasn't. It was very hard to maintain for larger projects. If you rename things, you had to do it in multiple places. It was just cumbersome. It was okay for smaller projects, but it wasn't very maintainable. So a bit cumbersome to work with, although it was easy to set up. So what Microsoft introduced recently at their conference Build this past spring is they have these things called shared projects, which are now integrated inside of Xamarin Studio. We also have them, of course, in Visual Studio, and it gives you better file linking. Great IDE integration. What a shared project will do is it'll pick up the references from the parent project that references it, and have access to all of that. And then that makes it really easy to use platform-specific code. Now, in addition to that, we have great PCL support, right? Portable class libraries. And this is excellent if you wanted to share code, but you say you were a library vendor, or you weren't within your own source. So the guidelines, the basic guideline, and it is just a guideline, is if you're within your own application and you're just trying to share code across projects, it's easier to do in general, right? Put that in quotes, when you're going the shared project route. If you're going to distribute a library or something that you're going to give out for other people to use, PCL is kind of the way to go. It makes it really, really great way to develop cross-platform code and distribute it in a single library. Right? That said, though, you can mix and match. If it becomes, I'll show you even an example where no reason you can't use a PCL in a shared project. Excuse me, with your own source. If you find it might be a convenient way to do something like, say, I just want to reference a NuGet and I don't want to do it twice, something like that. So use that as a guideline, but do what you need to do. It's not like a rule or anything. You could use PCLs in your own applications as well as for shared projects as well. Okay, so that's a little overview of like kind of the things we're going to go on to today to talk about in Xamarin Studio. Let's jump over to code now. So I have this little project that I built, a little app. It was Father's Day this past weekend, so let me run this guy. I've got an iOS and an Android version of it that I made. So I have just a little iOS application here. I'll show you it first. And if I go download, I download some data off the web. I'm just running off my local web server here, but yeah, you can do it off the web. And I just download some metadata, download some JSON, parse it, download an image, put it into an image view. Pretty simple, straightforward thing. And I go to the signature here, and I use one of our controls, our components that we have up in our components store we're going to see. And I can add a little signature to the thing, a little smiley face. And I go down, and I can just return it back to the first screen, and I have a nice signature application. Right? Similarly, let me do the thing. We'll stop that guy. Yes. Oops. Get a similar integration on Android here. I already have my emulator open for make it a little faster. Same kind of application. Download the metadata, put it in the screen, which is an activity in Android. I go to the signature. I can just draw a little smiley face there. My art's good. Yeah, same idea, right? So that's what the application does. And let's take a look. We're going to use that really to just kind of look through the IDE and see all the different kind of things you can do here. So first, let's take a look at the iOS application. So I want to take a view at the storyboard, and we'll see the designer here. So I have this main storyboard. I double-clicked on here, main storyboard, and I come into a storyboard. So this is great. Used to be that when that would happen, I double-click on it, I would launch Xcode. And I could do things in Xcode in the storyboard, and we would watch it, and we would track it, and we would update things in Xamarin Studio. Still had capability, but you'd have to drag, the biggest thing was you'd have to drag outlets to create, say I wanted to access a button, and I wanted to access a label and program against it from code. I'd have to create an outlet doing that, and I'd have to drag a line to a header file or this kind of quasi-controller that looks like it's an Objective-C, but we're only doing that to drag the tooling, and it was a really bizarre experience, especially for C# developer. Same idea if I wanted to create an action, which is just a command that I can hook a method up to a button or something. I'd have to create an action outlet. So I don't have to do that anymore. Right? Now I can do it all. One, I don't have to leave the IDE. I can stay right within Xamarin Studio. By the way, again, this is all available in Visual Studio. Folks are coming from that route again. I'll just mention that. But here I have my storyboard, and I'm in Xamarin Studio, and I have a couple controllers that I've created. You can see we have all the toolbox has full access to all of the controls you can get out from the native platform from UIKit, right? And it also will give you access to custom controls that you create yourself, right? Or you pull in from a third party like I have with our signature pad here. And if I were to do things like here, I have a UI label that I had dragged on, I can just give it a name. So I don't have to control click a line, drag it ahead, I just give it a name, right? And now I can use, like you could, a normal, a common idiom from people who've used designers in the Visual Studio world. You just give it a name. The XAML type tools called it X name, but just give the thing a name, and now I have a property that I can get at that control. In this case, it's a UI label. Same for anything, right? Same for the images or anything else. I can just give it a name. I can get at it. Now, the controller, which is in iOS, you have like the views, and you have a controller. The controller kind of acts the view. I have a class, and that class is the controller. So I could either pick an existing controller subclass that I might have, a subclass of UI view controller, or some other controller subclass, or I can just type, if I didn't have a controller and I just dragged one on the screen, which I can drag, as you can see in here, table view controller, and so on. I could just drag those into the storyboard. I could just type a name in the class, and Xamarin Studio would generate the class and hook it all up for me. So that then when I then put controls on the screen and give it a name, give them names, they would get accessible from the proper controller class. So if I came over to the Solution Explorer here, you'll see here on the, for example, I click on the second controller here on the screen. I had typed that. What I did is I typed that name, signature pad view controller. Then Xamarin Studio generated this signature pad view controller, and it generates a designer file to track any controls that I add on the screen. I'll show you what that is in a second. Right. Let's go back to the, before I leave though, let's go back to the first controller, and I'll show you some other things in here that you can do. So in addition to being able to just drag things on the screen, you could also hook up events to it. So I have, like, for example, down here I have a couple bar buttons, UI bar buttons here. In this case, I could hook up events, or I could hook up actions. You could hook up an event, like a .NET event, if our binding exposes an event for it. So if I have a UI button and I just drag that on the screen, all I have to do is double click and it would drop me into an event handler right in the controller. The other way I can do it is, like, with the UI bar button here, I could hook it up to an action, but then I don't have to drag and out to do it. I just go into events, I type a name of the method, and boom, I get the method added into my code, and I can start writing code. Again, very, very efficient workflow, what you would be used to coming from the Microsoft world. So here in the greetings view controller, which you'll see if I select the controller here, come back over to widget, I have greeting card view controller. That's that first screen of my application. And that's this guy here, right? You'll see there's this designer file if you expand underneath it, greeting card view controller designer. I'll show you what that is. That's where we actually track all the things that you created. So when I created I showed you a second ago, there's a bar button item, there's the image views, there's that label that we looked at, then I typed that name, greeting message view. Probably should have started with lowercase, but anyways, I give you the name greeting message view. That's where this gets generated for you. But you don't have to know about this. You don't have to see it. It's just to let you know under the covers this is what's happening. And this is a partial class. So then I can come up here into my greeting card view controller, and this is now I can write code against greeting message view. Again, by convention, I should have made that lowercase g. Sorry about that. But anyway, so that's my property that I typed into the designer. So you see back over here, I have the title. There's the message view one. Greeting message view is the name. I had to do nothing else. All I had to do is give it that name, and then boom, I can go right into the code, and I can start programming against greeting message view. Right? Pretty neat. Now, let's go back over to the designer and look at some other things. We additionally have others, anything that would come from storyboards from Apple, we support. In fact, you can even bring existing storyboards that you designed in Xcode right into this, and it'll just work. We can support different sizes. We support orientations. We can support showing it in iOS 6 or 7. It runs a headless simulator in the background, so you'd have to have an iOS 6 simulator installed to run that. But just it's in our documentation. If you went on our designer documentation, it explains setup and things like that. We also have great support for auto layout, which is their kind of constraint-based layout system that they have, they being Apple. And what's sort of sets it is, of course, segues, because they're storyboards. You can set a segue. That's how I can transition from one screen to another, give it a name, set a transition. This is how I got the flip. I just flip horizontal in the transition here down on the right. And that's how I get that kind of nice animated rotation from one screen to another when I clicked it. Don't have to write any code to do that, which is kind of neat. Now on the second screen here, on my second controller, I added this other control here, which is a signature pad. You see there's the little monkey emoticon, and I changed the color. What that is that's a custom control. It's actually not one I wrote. It's one that's that comes from our component store called it's our signature, the Xamarin signature pad. In fact, we open sourced it last month, so if folks want to get the source for it, they can. It works on Windows Phone, on iOS, and on Android, and the source is available. Nice MIT license. You can do whatever you want with it. But you can see this isn't how it looks by default. I actually added some code in here in my controller that's running behind the scenes. You see, if I go signature pad view controller, there's my signature pad, and there's a bunch of code I had. There's the mode. That's the monkey with the little hands up there. So you'll see here that code's actually running, and so that's why, because it's a headless simulator. So actually, we're running the code to render it at design time. That's how we can have like automatic updating at design time. Now, this isn't my control that I wrote. If you wanted to expose things like that emoticon as a property at design time in this property pad over on the right, you can do that. There's just some simple attributes you have to introduce on the control itself. Perhaps I'll do that at one point and submit it to this control. But if you want to see how to do that in your own controls that you author, again, check out our blog. Just a few days ago, I wrote a blog post on shows how to author custom controls. But even if you didn't author it, like the point is for the designer, you'll still get the design time rendering. And you can see here, that's like custom rendering. So it's kind of cool. I can see just what it looks like without rendering the app. And there's nothing shipping today in the world that does that. Yeah. So that's kind of neat. So that's our design time rendering, sort of a pretty awesome feature. All right, so that's our iOS designer. Now let's go over and take a look at the code a little bit. Here you'll see I have this thing called signature pad. Where did that come from? If in greeting card iOS under components, there's this thing called signature pad. So let me just close the storyboard here for a second. But I had to. But if I go get more components, I already did it. You'll see what that does is it loads up our component store. Right now, I'm already logged in, so it loads up as logged in as me. And there are components of all different types, some user interface, some libraries, all different types of things across different platforms, some on one or the other, some on all of them, that you could use within your project. And it's nicely integrated, and I just click it, and it one-click integration, and it brings the component right into the project, and I could use it. It also comes, every component, some are free, some are for sale. This is a store, and every component comes with a nice documentation and solution example project that you could use to get you started. Now, this is pretty awesome because it's what's neat about this is these things are curated, so it's not like anyone can just submit it and it's a free-for-all. Anyone can submit a component, but they get tested and they get checked, and it's like a review process, and you can sell them. I think there's a 70-30 sales split. It's like a kind of app store kind of split. So you can make free ones, you can sell them and make money, but point is that these are nicely integrated with Xamarin Studio, and they're curated, so they're like pretty high quality. What you'll find in there, there's a lot of commercial things you'll find in there, and there's a lot of free things as well. So that's what I did with the signature pad. I just added the signature pad in on iOS as a component, and then I could use it. And then it became available in my both from code or from the designer. I could have dragged and dropped it. If I do it with code, I could just create it completely in code. I do it from the designer. I can drag and drop it. It's immediately available in my toolbox in the iOS designer. Pretty cool. Now, the other kind of package or third-party code integration we've added, though, you'll see over here in my shared code, which I call Greeting Card Core. It's a simple project. I just have one little class in it, but that's just a portable class library. I'll just take a step back and note that. It's a portable class library just because I kind of felt like doing it that way. I had in my slide, there was the note about, in general, use portable class libraries to share code if you're a library vendor, whereas if I was doing I'm not going to share this Greeting Card Core, if I was just going to keep it as my own source in my project and I just wanted it shared across iOS, Android like this, probably an easier route would be to use the new share project support. I could have done it either way. I kind of like doing it with the portable class library for the even in a shared project. If I'm going to use the next thing I'm going to show you, our NuGet, because then I could just add the NuGet in one place. But if I had done it with a shared project, the NuGet I'm going to show you I could have added from iOS and Android, and the shared project would just pick up its parent references, like we mentioned in the slide earlier. So you could do it either way. Just do what you feel makes sense to you. Right. Now, if you're going to ship a library, though, if you're going to be a library vendor, like, for example, guy Stuart Lodge makes a great library called MVVM Cross. Paul Betts from GitHub, he has a whole bunch of libraries and various things he makes. That's the way to ship that stuff is at a PCL. It just becomes the best way to do it. And there's all kinds of advanced features you can do with PCLs to ship even platform-specific code, and by shipping a contract. And in the event, though, I did it as a PCL here. Now, you'll see in the references here, I have this from packages. So what that is, and I could have done, I could have referenced these packages in iOS or in Android directly, but I'm doing it in my PCL here just so it would make it one place where I have to share it. What it is those packages are our NuGet integration. So if you see under packages here, I have two things I'm using in my simple application here. One is I referenced the HTTP client stuff from Microsoft, and I'm also using the excellent JSON support from James Newton King, the JSON.net. So, but what I could do, I get updates automatically. You can automatically update packages. If I click on the package that I've already referenced and right-click, I can see the version I have. If I want to get a new package, I just go Add Packages, and it takes a second to search. So NuGet was searching a little slow to me. Okay, good, so and I get full search NuGet, and this is how I added JSON.net, right? And I just go Add Package, and like you'd expect, even doing it from Visual Studio, you get nice, beautiful, seamless NuGet integration, and that's how that works. So that's pretty cool. Additionally, with the NuGet support, we have integrated search within Xamarin. So if I was going to go, say, HTTP client, or whatever, right, up in here, in our search, you can see it says Search and Solution, Search and Packages. So if I do Search and Packages, that gets us right into the so that's what I meant by the nice integrated search. So it's our unified search that we have built within Xamarin Studio that searches everything within your project can also directly search to the new NuGet integration. Pretty neat. So that's our NuGet support. Now, there's a lot more to it. There's a lot of other little features, but that's kind of the main thing. So it's pretty nice to have that now with proper first-class support for NuGet shipping with Xamarin Studio. So that's great. So we have you saw two kind of ways to bring in third-party things or components, controls, libraries. We have one, which is our own component store, which are curated things. Some are free, some for sale within the platform-specific projects themselves. And we have, what you already mostly probably already know and love, the package manager NuGet, which brings in all the different mainly open source things from NuGet, and that's pretty great, and that can be used in any project from Xamarin, right? So that's excellent. Now, I also have that, by the way, in Android. So I also did the same thing here. When I'm using the component, I wanted to use the component on the UI side of it. So same idea there. I won't have to show you the same screen where I just added the component through the component store on the Android side, right? This is the thing where I said, if I'd done the shared product, I would have done the NuGet in the two places to pick it up. So I'm saving myself the one step to do it that way. No big deal. So that's kind of shared packages in two different ways we can do it. Now, another thing that we have, there's more. So we saw the iOS Designer. We saw sort of this kind of shared code approach that we can have. Another thing we have is if I go to Resources, Layout, main.axml, and the Android project, we have our Android Designer. And again, this has been shipping now for a couple of years. And we have this Android Designer. It's pretty great, especially with the Android. You have all these different, so many, thousands of devices and layouts, and it's great to have a designer that can kind of support different modes. So you can have different layouts. You can talk about different API levels in here. You can change orientation. You can pick the different device styles that you have to kind of show what it would look like on a device. For example, that's what it looked like on Nexus 10. Go back to Nexus 7. I could add custom ones. So there's a few styles that we ship with it, but you can customize it and make your own style of device to look how it would render. Modes where you can kind of lock different configurations, to say like a control is available in one orientation versus another, things like that. There's also zooming and layout kind of stuff just on the design surface itself. Theme support, lots of themes in Android, so we can do, for example, I'm going to use in this application the whole light, so you can see there it just changes it. It can change to other ones. Right? So that's kind of our Android Designer and design surface. What this thing is doing is the Android Designer, it's just like sitting, whereas iOS there's no markup, say, to do UI. So in that Designer, it's just it's using the storyboard format, and that effectively serializes the object graph, the kind of, which is usually just UI things, the views. right, and the controllers. So with Android, it's a little different. They have a markup, this AXML format. It's just an XML dialect. Kind of like other people have done this sort of thing. Mozilla did it with Zool, and of course Silverlight, and people are real familiar with XAML. We've introduced XAML now, even into like Xamarin Forms has XAML support. But from a designer perspective, what Android's doing is it's a designer for AXML. What happens is at runtime, the term is inflated. These XML files get inflated into controls, right? So you can program straight into the XML if you wanted, and type right in XML, or you can just do it with our designer. And if you click on it, it's kind of the things you'd expect, all the support for all the properties that you'd have on any control. There's a rich layout system in Android, so you have support for that, and styling and things such as that. Now, if we were to go into the activity on Android, the way you can then program against it, it's a little different from the iOS side. We saw, I just give it a name. Sorry, wrong one here. I just give it a name, and boom, I can start programming against it because we generate that thing in a partial class, and I just give it a name and I can program against the control. On the Android side, what we generate, it's just we do it the Android way, so to speak. There's this generated class called this resource class, right? So this resource class generates a bunch of identifiers for everything we give an ID all throughout the different parts, different resources that you can have within Android. Some are in the UI AXML. There's drawerables, which is just images, things like that. There's string resources, which is just XML files where you could have strings in them, things such as that, right? And you could have them for different, various different device resolutions and pixel densities and so on. So what they do is they generate this resource file, and that lets us get a hook to all the different things you can have in Android. And then what you can get at it is you just use resource ID, and I get title view, and that's the thing that I put in the XML or in the designer as the ID, right? And you call this find by view method. A little nicer than doing it from the Java side because we have a generic that I could use, so I can find view by ID, give it the ID that I typed. So I can see in here, we'll get IntelliSense, excellent IntelliSense support. And see, there's the tooltip support that I talked about earlier. And you can get back to different types and programming and stuff. All right, so that's how you work with the designer in the integrated designer experience when you're coming at it from Android. That's that. Now, let me take a jump back, and I want to go over the code a little bit because I never really went over the code and how this thing all works in iOS. So let's take a second here to talk about the application and how the thing's put together in iOS and in Android. So on the iOS side, we saw in the designer, oops, excuse me. Let's close that. Go back to the storyboard. So we saw in the designer, we have basically two screens, right? There's a view controller for each one. Right? There's a segue between them. The first screen is going to show a couple images, a couple labels, a couple buttons on the toolbar. Second screen there's a segue, and then the segue is going to take us to the second screen, doing that flip transition that we set on the segue, and it's going to show the second screen that has our custom control, or our control that does the signature. Right? From code, if I go to greeting card view controller, that's the controller for that first screen. Right? So it's just a UI view controller, and we do our normal. We have our normal iOS things that you'd have if you were even kind of coming at it from an Objective-C direction. Except you don't have to do all the business with outlets, and you get a much nicer language with features like async await are supported, even with things such as a method, such as this download method here. That's the function method I'm hooking up. So if the command is executed when you click the button. So when I click the button and it pulled down the two strings to put into the labels and the image, this is what it called. It called it download button, and it did that because I just set that in the designer as the method to call, right? And I could also do it if it was like a UI button on the screen. I could double click and it would just drop me right into an event handler. Do it that way. So this was kind of like a command, almost like a command way to do it. In any event, though, I have this method here that's just, it gets wired up automatically for me to get called. And I can just write some code in here to go at it. I get async await that I can even put on the things that are getting wired to the methods from iOS, right? From a thing that has nothing to do really, that didn't come from the C# world underneath the covers, but we can use async, and I can make something like this download method async, and I can await a call to my common code, right? Then once I get back this greeting card type that I have, if you see, if I go to var, you get a nice tooltip where you can see this is a type greeting card. I can then just like program against the two views and get the other properties, get nice IntelliSense on types like this. You can see text, like it. This makes it very easy. The great IntelliSense, and having a language like C# with IDEs that have good IntelliSense support that statically typed languages like C# enable. Makes it really easy to discover an API, much easier than dynamic languages that problem becomes a little harder to solve. So you'll find like using something like C# or even using F# even, you'll be able to discover the and tooling like Xamarin Studio or Visual Studio, you can discover iOS's or Google's APIs and learn about them without having to constantly jump out to the straight to the docs sites from Apple. That's how a lot of Apple developers do it. So that's kind of neat. That's what I have here. Now you'll see this code here, greeting card, core greeting card. That's the code from my my shared library, my PCL. So yeah, it could have been a shared project. So there's my greeting card code, right? And you can see here I just have a little async method that just gives me back a task of the greeting card. And within that, I'm using, so this is the kind of code I can share. And I could use NuGet, I could use HTTP client, I could use JSON.NET, I could use whatever I want in there. Right? And the attributes here are from JSON.NET. What's beautiful is now I could use this thing in Android as well. Right? Simple application where I just have the one, but more complex application, this could become very beneficial to be able to share code like that. So that's the code I'm using in there. And then after that, I just use normal iOS things to apply my view, prepare for the segue, move to the second screen, and then I just give it a nice little method that I can call back to get the image back from the signature pad. On the second screen, the actual signature pad view controller. Here I just did it. I just initialized the whole thing in code. That's the easy way to do it with this particular control. Right now, right? We can make design. I'm thinking about myself even going in there. Maybe I'll have a chance. I'll submit it so that we could do these kind of things in the designer too, the custom properties that is. But very easy to initialize and set up the signature pad control. Pretty great. And capture a signature, get an image out of it is one line of code. Right? Get image, and then I can do platform specific thing to put it back into the particular platform UI. In this case, the way I abstracted that out is I just did it real simple. I just abstracted it out with like a function point effectively, right? A method, delegate there, apply signature image. You could now you could get into like architectures where you can start saying, well, I could put that kind of code in a view model, or I could put it in a presenter that gives back an interface, and then the client code would know about the interface, or it would just this kind of code would go in the view model, and then even a code like that line there could then become reusable and testable. Right? A little bit of overkill for just going to do one method though. But however you abstracted it, that kind of code is there and can be used, and the signature back can be used on multiple platforms. So it kind of makes that kind of neat. So that's that. And then I just do some iOS specific things to dismiss the controller. Will get me back to the screen. That's how I get that flipping experience where it just kind of goes to the one screen, and then it gets dismissed, and it uses the same transition to go back to the original screen, and it flips. And again, and I'll show you. Oops, show you what that means here. And there's the download. And when I click the signature, you saw no code to get that. I could cancel it and whatever, and get that flip back. Kind of nice. Now on the Android side, we saw a little bit about back to the Android side. We had that first activity, and I had the design of it done completely in XML. Right, in the AXML through our designer, and I can just program against it. And I use activities and the activity lifecycle to kind of take care of business. And I just used, again, you'll see down below, I use greeting card core, greeting card create. So I'm using the same kind of code. Again, you can see, well, oh great, I could put that in a view model. I'd be able to abstract that, even that up. But I'm using the same exact code in the same library from Android shared. That's the benefit, right? That's the biggest benefit of everything. Everything kind of builds on top of that. And if you use this nice designer to build up the whole UI. That said though, I don't have to use the designer. I could even go like I did in the signature. The second screen I show here is another activity. In this case, the signature activity. And I can build up my UI completely in code. I find it a lot, in general, I personally like to kind of do some things in code, just kind of how my mind's maybe wired. But in the Android world, because the API is really the UI toolkit that they have is designed to really be done declaratively from XML. A lot of times it's easy. It's just more natural to do it in XML in that world. But you can do it either way. So you have full access to code, and you can get it layout parameters to do layout kind of things. Not necessarily the cleanest layout there, but that's all I'm doing is I'm just setting up a signature. And then the way I'm handing it back in this particular case, because activities are very loosely coupled, I just dropped it into a temporary file that it can get picked up with on activity result. There's other ways you could then do files. I could try to pass objects around with an parcelable that would make a copy though, so that's not necessarily efficient. Some people try to use singletons, but they have tendencies to run into memory leak problems, especially on Android, so I stay away from that. Another idea is to use a service. You can use an Android service and put the shared, the common memory, keep everything in memory in there, and I can pick it up that way. But to just kind of push stuff back, the easiest way is to just drop it into a file. So that's what I'm doing there. I'm just giving I'm just setting a result that everything's okay. I give the name of the file that I want to go to, and then when I go back, when the thing is done, when I click the done button, which we'll call this finish thing here, that's going to put me back to the activity that raised it with a start activity call for a result. Right? And that's how it knows to come back into this guy, and then I can just pull out the image from my, I did it from internal storage, so it'll only be accessible to my application in that case, and I can, simple set the image view to a bitmap, platform specific kind of code to like actually put the image onto the UI. And again, if I run that guy, run that item here, I already started up my emulator here. Go download, and I could just, so that's the core code, the code that's in my PCL. Could have been a shared project again, to get that data down, right? Platform specific code to populate it into the UI. Go to the signature screen here, button, and go to the different activity, and smile, done. And I didn't do anything to do the animated transition. There's nothing quite as easy as like doing a drop down like that on Android. You could do a flip or an animation. There's great animation APIs, just like for the demonstration here today, that would have been a bunch to do. Just as easy to like just go back and just do the normal activity, rendering to like resume back, right? And if I had clicked the back button, I wouldn't have got the on activity result, and it would have functioned like a cancel in that case. And you can see using shared code, designers in all worlds, shared components to do things like, curated components to do UI things, such as the signature pad right out of the box, NuGet integration, usable within the platform-specific projects themselves, usable within shared projects because they pick it up from the platform-specific projects, usable within a PCL. PCL support works great. And oh, by the way, we have the same product and solution format that Visual Studio uses. I could just open this thing up on Visual Studio and run it all. And then if I wanted to start bringing in Windows-type platforms, I could do that. That said, another thing that we added, that's kind of like a smaller thing that's kind of gone on the side, but not so small, is you can't develop, of course. You need Windows, just like you need iOS. You need a Mac to do iOS development, and even if you did Visual Studio, you remote to it. You need Windows to do Windows development. But to save people the trouble of having to have multiple solutions if they didn't want to, or do it with build configurations, things like that, we now at least support opening Windows Phone projects. So you can't do anything with it, but you'll be able to have it within the same solution. So you can kind of seamlessly move back and forth between the different IDEs if that's how some people will tend to work that way a little bit. So have that support for it as a convenience. There are some other nice things though in our IDE. I'm gonna show you those, and then we can just a couple other little nicety things, and then some people don't know about. If you do, maybe it'd be cool to see anyway again. One thing we have is, you have to see I'm zoomed here, so I can just like pinch, or I can do it with Command plus, Command minus. I can zoom on the editor here, right? I can make it really big, really small. But we also have that support in the solution pad, right? See, I can zoom this guy. Some people know about that, but I've been surprised how many people don't. I don't remember. I think I discovered it on my own at one point, just kind of by accident. So it's got great support, like great for presentations, or if you're showing things, or even like if you have like a nice monitor, but they can get a little small if you're getting up in age like me or something. Your eyes are going. It's kind of nice to have. Additionally, some other cool things we have. Like you see these things on the right. So folks that are coming from the Visual Studio world, like I mentioned earlier, and use ReSharper, right? What we have, this is that code analysis business that I talked about. So if I went into the Xamarin Studio preferences, and I went down into text editor, and it says source analysis, enable source analysis on open files. That's what gives you that. So you get all these little, some of them are warnings, some of them are errors. You can see here I've got something that I did, and it's going to tell me, some kind of warning. Here, if I get the tooltip, here. There, warning, parameter name differs in the base method declaration. So and then there's other things like it'll help me, remove here I'm not using this using directive, it'll help me remove that. Gives you little refactorings, little things to fix. If you did a lambda expression, you just did a one line, you can remove the brackets around it. Little small things that just kind of like allow you to follow rules to standardize your code, make it nice. Just very very ReSharper-esque, built right into Xamarin Studio. Just have to turn it on there where I showed you. Kind of interesting, kind of neat feature. Very familiar for folks that use ReSharper, and even if you haven't, I encourage folks to turn that on. Pretty cool. So that's yeah, I showed you the integrated search. We have great search here. There's some other things in Xamarin Studio that have been there for a while that not all folks know about. If I come into the references here, say I double click on system, we have an awesome assembly explorer. So you can come in here and you can kind of explore I just clicked on system, but you can kind of explore all the types, right? If you came in and say I have mono.android, it's kind of neat. So I can kind of double click on that guy, and I can explore. That's like where all our bindings happen for for Xamarin Android. Same idea for if I came down here and double click. Xamarin iOS used to be called monotouch. I can see all the types that we've bound. You can see the whole binding to all the native APIs from Apple, and that's where all that lives, right? So you can kind of search that, and kind of neat. You could also search, and neat feature is I can actually type the selector if you wanted to look at the Objective-C selector, and we'll actually search you right to. We're smart enough to know where that's bound to, and we'll take you to the type where we bound it to in C#. So kind of cool. So that's a little walk around Xamarin Studio. I want to show you, still have a few minutes, I want to show you, close the solution here. I want to just give you a quick look at F# here. So if I did a file new solution, where I did that, of course there's all the great C# support, but we've now got in here F# support. See, Android, iOS, Mac. So I can make an iOS library, a couple project templates for iOS, same for Android, right? So I have that integrated in, so make it easy to get started building an F# application. So a little sharper. It's actually, you don't even need to make it because F# is allows you to express things so concise as it is. It's really good on screen real estate, funny enough, for demonstrations. But you can see here, functional language. You can see right here, there's this. What this application is doing is it's just a little simple thing that calls Yahoo web service to get some stocks and populates a UI table view controller and a UI table view within it, using Microsoft as an example there. So here's the get stocks function. You can see very functional. If folks haven't looked at functional languages in general, or if not F#, other functional languages maybe, if you haven't, if you're familiar with the kind of things you can do with link and extension methods and link, very similar ideas. Or if folks have if anyone's looked at reactive programming from any language, similar ideas there, right? Very functional things. You can kind of chain together, the work you would do, command after command, basically, nice and clean. So you can do a lot in very little, almost like writing. The syntax is a little different. So it's like if you're coming from a C kind of based language, it's going to look a little different. But it's very, you get past the syntax, it's very concise, the way to express what you're going to do. So you write a lot less code to do the same kind of things. And once you learn it and you understand the syntax, any functional language is going to be that way. And the benefit of functional languages is you don't have the issues that come with immutability unless you want them. You can make things mutable. And then the issues that come with null and classes of bugs can go away. You can see down here that this is compelling for even someone like me who's done a lot of iOS development, be it whether you're coming, certainly if you're coming out from Objective-C direction, but even C# awesome and it's a great language. But you can see how concise you can do things. Look at how awesome this is. Here's a table view controller, and I've implemented. But the example here implements view.did_load and it uses that Yahoo function up here I'm going to use and get stocks, and I can put the source in place for the table view. You can implement get cell right down in there. You can implement rows and section. You can do it all within one block of code here, one expression. No, not more than one expression, but it's one concise little amount of code. It becomes very concise. Now, sometimes it's nice to have the code. If it's a little, it can be a little too concise in some cases to handle or to kind of to grok the thing. But really, really expressive language as far as being able to do a lot with a little, so to speak. Very powerful. So, and the big point is, it's like first-class support right within Xamarin Studio, both from iOS and from Android. So that's just a quick look at F#. And what you can do with that. And of course, you can use F# and PCLs and mix and match. You got C# from your front end, and folks do it that way. Kind of do whatever you find benefits you. Kind of cool. So that's shipping today. So with that, let's go back over to here. Just about on time here. So talked about that. As you can see here on that last slide, just to bring it again, I kind of broke my, it's a guideline, right? It's merely a guideline. I mean, you generally, if I was doing that and I was building an application, I'd probably use the shared code now that we have that, but I just did it in the PCL. Not for a big reason, really. It was just to have the one place I could reference the NuGet. But, you could do it either way. If I was making a library, PCL is the way to go there. Okay. So that's the presentation I have for today. Thanks everybody for your attentiveness. Hopefully that was beneficial. We'll walk through Xamarin Studio and some of our new features. There's my contact information before we go into Q&A. If anyone needs anything at all, not that I can answer everything, but I can find you an answer. Feel free to email me, or that's my Twitter account. Follow me, I'll follow you back. You can DM me, direct message me if you want. You can just, if you don't want to bother to follow me, you can just message me directly publicly on Twitter, or email me, and I'll get back to anyone that messages me. Sometimes it takes a little bit if you get a lot of incoming messages after things like this, but happy to help anyone in any way I can. So let's go into Q&A now.
Okay, first question, does Xamarin Studio have support for Razor templates?
Yeah, so we have great support for Razor templates. So glad you asked that. Let me show you here. I'll get the Citrix thing here. If you look, I'll put it up on a forum, or I'll put it in the notes that we post for the blog rather than me digging around. We have a thing called Portable Razor, right, on our blog. I'll give a shout out to Joseph Hill. He did it on his own as a side project, and it's turned it into something that we have now. That actually Michael Hutchinson, who works on Xamarin Studio a long time, he actually built the work to did some work to bring Razor into Xamarin Studio, right? And then Joseph did some work to make Razor work with the ASP.NET MVC commands that you could use with Razor, like action, link, and all those things, right? And like the little URL helpers. So what we have now is not only do we have Razor support, but you could use this thing called Portable Razor, and you could use Razor plus ASP.NET MVC implementation that we have to template out your front end, your front end with HTML with Razor templates, and then make sort of a hybrid. If you wanted to take an approach to make a hybrid app, like I said earlier, we don't recommend to people do something in HTML because, again, for the limitations I mentioned, you're going to have performance, could run into performance problems. But if you take this approach with our kind of HTML front end way to do it, you wouldn't have the capability limitations, because you could use Razor to then template it and then kind of easily bridge out from your HTML and JavaScript to your C# and build a hybrid application and use ASP.NET MVC to do it. We have Portable Razor, it's open source, and we also have a starter kit we made called Portable Congress. It was just a use case that we did. And I made a little application that you can use and you can check out to show you how to get started doing it. So yeah, total support for that. Great question.
The second question is, what is the difference between NuGet and the Xamarin Component Store?
Sure, good question. So yeah, maybe I went over that a little too fast. So they're both, basically call them package repositories. So the Xamarin Component Store is from Xamarin, right? And it's, as I mentioned, it's curated. So everything that, if I wanted to make a component, right? Say I wanted to make a graphing component or whatever, right? Something I wrote, and I wanted to distribute it through the component store with Xamarin. I could submit it to us, right? I'd submit it to Xamarin, and there's a bunch of requirements. You have to have documentation on it. You have to have, it gets tested by Xamarin. So our components team will test it. It has to have proper documentation. It has to have a sample project and a nice page with like a bunch of requirements to go onto the store itself. And you can sell. Now you can make it free, or you can sell a component in our component store, right? So so that's the two big things. One is you could do commerce in there, right? You could actually sell something, and the other thing is, even if you made it free, if you want to do an open source thing, it would still get curated. We'll still check it. So it functions almost like the App Store, for components in that respect, right? Now, NuGet is an open source repository of all these libraries that people can submit, and it's created by folks at Microsoft, and it's worked for some time in Visual Studio. And I could just, if I wanted to publish a NuGet package, I could just do it. I could do it right now, and no one's going to curate that, right? And as far as from an integration standpoint, another difference is the component store you would use right within Xamarin projects, right? You wouldn't use it in the shared in the PCL site, right? Whereas a NuGet you'd have the flexibility to use it anywhere you want. So, because NuGet isn't just for Xamarin, whereas the component store designed for Xamarin projects. Although that said, we do have support for Windows things in the component store, such as that signature pad that I showed that actually would work in Windows Phone as well.
Awesome. And finally, what options/tooling are available for building cross-platform apps with Xamarin?
So the options are like, well, so this
So like libraries and stuff.
So if you mean libraries, okay. So there's different things you can do. So what I showed you here today was basically taking the approach of using Xamarin and doing it within Xamarin Studio. You could have done it all within Visual Studio too, right? I'm building a native front end. Xamarin's always a native UI, right? Unless you take a hybrid approach, right? And I'm going to redo the user interface, and then I could have some common core. You implicitly get that from Xamarin, right? Where you can just share the common core, just your normal .NET code to do your HTML, your link, your parsing of JSON, whatever, math libraries, things like that. Now, if I wanted to share more code, though, we offer other things. So on a case-by-case basis, we have a library called Xamarin.mobile available in our component store that abstracts some things. So what that does is it abstracts away geolocation, so say the GPS or just geolocation in general. It abstracts away the camera, and it also abstracts the address book. So you could write cross-platform code for the address book, for the camera, and for geolocation, and underneath it uses native APIs. Of course, if it has something in abstraction that's in the lower level API doesn't have any abstraction, rather, you could always drop down into the lower level one. Then we have other things like Xamarin Auth that does OAuth. We have a Xamarin social component that allows you to do Twitter, Facebook, things like that. We have the signature pad, like I showed you, that allows you to do the little signature component. That's cross-platform. So there's a bunch of libraries, components that we have to do that sort of work. Now, above that, there are open source things that the people in the community do. Like I mentioned Stuart Lodge, I'll give him a shout out. He's got a library called MVVM Cross. That's cross-platform. That's very, very popular in the Xamarin world. Paul Betts from GitHub has a reactive UI, which is a great MVVM library that sits on top of reactive extensions for .NET. He has a bunch of other things too. He's got like an image thing called Splat and a key value store, Activash. He's got all kinds. He does modern HTTP client. So there's a bunch of community things. Now, to complete that answer though, we've recently introduced Xamarin Forms. So I talk about like you would redo the UI and have the native UI. So you're always going to have the native UI, but with Xamarin Forms, what we did is we've now taken it one step further, and I didn't show you that here today. If you're interested in Xamarin Forms, we did a webinar just a few days ago, tons of stuff on our site. If you have any questions, email me. Xamarin Forms, though, takes it one step further, and it actually abstracts the UI. So that now with Xamarin Forms, where you would use it, where you choose to use it, you get a cross-platform user interface code. A cross-platform set of user interface code that would work cross-platform would work everywhere, right? Work everywhere being the mobile platforms, Windows Phone, Android, and iOS. So now I am write once run anywhere with the Xamarin Forms code. However, it's not write once run anywhere in that it's like some like higher level rendering abstraction to say HTML or writing my own rendering engine underneath. It's actually an abstraction that's just sitting on top of the native UIs. So I create a button with Xamarin Forms underneath the covers on iOS. I get a UI button. I get a button on Android. List controls, I get a UI table view, I get a list view. I get the proper native controls underneath. We're not drawing anything with Xamarin Forms. We're just abstracting the native platforms. So it's not write once run anywhere under the covers. Under the covers, it's a native platform. End user gets a native performing application. End user gets native controls that they see. And what's what's nice about it is if the abstraction doesn't have something you need, if you need it to get directly at the lower level API, like what I'm showing you here today, which is kind of what I did in the demonstration here today, you can always do that with Xamarin Forms. There's different ways to, different extension points to talk to it at the view or the controller level. And then there's if you wanted to get at services like There's a dependency injection service that allows you to get into, say you wanted to do audio APIs or text-to-speech, things like that. So you're never like kind of locked with, not only is it native underneath, you're never locked with it. So I encourage people to check out Xamarin Forms as probably the best answer to that question of like where you would start for doing total cross-platform with Xamarin. That would be a good place to start.
Thanks, Mike. That's it for the Q&A. If we were unable to get to your question, the Xamarin Forums at forums.xamarin.com is a great place to get your question answered if you have one. Once again, this webinar has been recorded, so we're going to upload the video and we'll email it directly to you when it's ready. Thanks everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you again in a future webinar. Thanks.